This is what happens when you get a whole group of amateurs and unqualified people in the most important job and the appointments around that job. Donald Trump, as you've heard me say many times, is appallingly ignorant. He has no idea what he's doing. Among other things, he announced a week ago, the war would be over in 4 or 5 weeks. And a war is not a package of cheese at the grocery store with a use-by date. He insists that, we're not targeting civilians. Well, okay, so the bombing of the school with the precision munition may have been a mistake. The building, the girls' school, apparently at one time was a military building, and we could have out-of-date intelligence. But in Tehran, it is literally raining oil, a metropolitan area of 9 million people where what's falling out of the sky is oil, which means there are all sorts of hydrocarbons that are getting into people's lungs that are going to cause long-term health problems, and that includes a lot of children. The expectation that I will pick your next leader or you won't pick one without my approval, I mean, this is absurd. And here in Donald Trump, we're seeing now again that he doesn't believe any rules, any limits, any constitutional requirements fall on him. He's trying to starve Cuba, which has been cut off their oil. He's stolen hundreds of millions of dollars worth of oil that belongs to the people of Venezuela. And did we get regime change in Venezuela? No. The number 2 is now in charge in Venezuela, and the rest of the Maduro crowd are all there. It's just Maduro and his wife are gone. He continues to threaten NATO and talk about taking over Iceland. All of this is indicative of his amateurism, and then you throw in his frontal lobe dementia, his appalling ignorance about world affairs, and perhaps in the long run, most importantly of all, the abject failure of Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Thune, and the other elected Republicans to do their constitutional duty, which is that the president is there to carry out the directives of Congress, not the other way around.
Yeah, boy, that really summarizes so much. I'll play for you last night. He had a back and forth, and there are 2 cuts here I'd like you to hear. First, it relates to the Tomahawk. And I think you're going to smile because this is the kind of journalism you don't see much of in the press corps these days. Someone really calling out Trump's claim that the Tomahawk was an Iranian Tomahawk that took out that. It's cut 6, please, Tony.
Mr. President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
So, first of all, that's not true, of course, David, that many other nations have Tomahawks. I think one other nation does, maybe 2.
We are the makers. Yeah, we're the makers, and we control who can buy them. But, Mark, you're an international jewel thief, and we're going to expose you on this show. I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I can say that. The level of illogic here is that of a child, because Donald is a child who has conned people into thinking he's this great genius. And all you have to do is look around at what's happened since he got back into office. The price of oil is up. It'll go back down. It always does. It goes up and down. But, he claims credit for the price of eggs coming down. No, 1 in 4 laying hens in America had to be destroyed because of an avian flu. And as soon as we got new chicks to grow up and start laying eggs, the price of eggs came down. The prices of commodities we're trying to sell, they've fallen in some cases more than 50%. And there are farmers all across the country who, if they don't get a bailout from the government, are going to go bankrupt. Job growth under Obama. I mean, we're going way back now. Once the economy turned around, so a year after Obama took office, job growth ran about 203,000 jobs a month. Before last month, Donald was doing about 15,000 jobs a month. In other words, job growth has fallen more than 90%, and then we got a $92,000 loss of jobs. None of this is working. Lots of people have known that, warned about it, said it won't happen. And Donald still has this core of people who think that, borrowing money so that super rich people can pay less taxes, cutting healthcare in ways that guarantee the rest of us who still have healthcare will pay higher prices for our healthcare. And every other thing that Trump is doing is designed to mine the large majority of Americans, to pick their pockets and transfer money to the super rich. Now, I wrote a whole book about this back in 2000, that came out at the end of 2007, called Free Lunch, but it wasn't on the scale of what we're seeing today. This is unbelievably gigantic, and yet there's Donald Trump, and avoiding through all of these actions, particularly the war, the Epstein files. And by the way, it's just come out that there are vastly more Epstein files than the 6 million documents. It appears to be much more extensive documentation. And now that they're looking at the ranch in New Mexico that Epstein owned, I hope they bring in LIDAR, land penetrating radar, to see if there are any bodies buried.
I mean, it literally is that. I mean, there may be just that. I also will just remind everyone that the specifics around the incident, this is just last week, associated with the underage girl who had interaction with Trump, claimed she had interaction with Trump. I mean, that was a series of FBI interviews. It wasn't just one. I mean, if FBI interviews continue multiple times, there seems, an implied credibility to that allegation. In any case, that stuff is coming out too.
And some journalists, Mark, have run down various things from the additional documents been released that add to the likelihood that her story has credibility. And let's remember, there are an estimated 1,000 to 1,200 girls, now all grown women, and more than 200 of them, some of them anonymously, in terms of the public, have given sworn testimony about their being raped, otherwise sexually assaulted. More than 200. And is the Justice Department talking to them? No, Pam Bondi wouldn't even turn around and look at them. This is this unbelievable cover-up. And if you're innocent, then why are you doing this?
The crew that you talk about benefiting financially from so much of what Donald Trump is doing, that billionaires boys club that he's put together in his cabinet, even his kids, one of whom started a drone company, as you know, I want to say maybe a month before he got a huge contract with the government for drones. I mean, literally, this is not a crew that knew anything about drones, and they started a company, got a big government contract, boom, now they're in the drone business. So many of these people who are associated with Wall Street investment and more traditional investment are a bit spooked by what's happening with the markets. And there is pressure, Wall Street Journal reporting today on that, on Trump to wrap this up. Play me the timeline reference that he makes. Cut 5, please, if you would, Tony.
You said earlier that we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. What do you consider enough? What's your baseline?
Where they're not going to be starting the following day to develop a nuclear weapon, where they'll look at that man and some other people from the administration and say, all right, we're not going to do it. They were not willing to say that. And when Steve called up and he said that to me, I said, well, here we go. Let's do it the hard way. But the hard way, I think, is probably the easy way. When basically I can see that they will no longer have any capacity whatsoever for a very long period of time of developing weaponry that could be used against the United States, Israel, or any of our allies. We have great allies in the Middle East, great countries that are allies. And they were staying out of it until they got hit. Someday they'll have to do a story, why did he do that? Why did they do that? But they were going to hit them. If I didn't hit them first, they were going to hit our allies first. I believe, upon information and belief, but I believe that he was going to They were going to take over the Middle East. They were looking to take over the Middle East. Now, had Operation Midnight Hammer not taken place, that was definite, because they would have had a nuclear weapon within a matter of weeks. But that took place. That was a setback. But look at the number of missiles they were able to buy and make over the last 6 months. And those missiles were aimed at various countries. And when you look at over 1,000 missiles shot at like UAE, they were looking to take over the Middle East. We got there first. We're lucky.
Okay,
I'll tell
David,
you what, the Middle East and those countries very.
You can hear the kind of, it's the belief philosophy. You know, I believe this is,
First of all, utter nonsense. I've been hearing the Iranians are weeks away from having a nuclear weapon since I didn't have a gray hair on my head, not one. So that's a long, long time ago. Secondly, Trump told us after Operation Midnight Hammer that we completely obliterated their ability to make nuclear weapons. So which is it? You were wrong then, or you're wrong now, or were you wrong both times? The Iranians have made it very clear that, they hate our country and they hate the Israelis. They're not trying to take over the rest of the Middle East. They hate the regimes there too. So do those regimes, our friends. And it's not like we're picking a bunch of white knights against Iran. Iran's leadership is a vicious dictatorship that demands complete bowing down to the Ayatollahs. But MBS, who's been putting at least $2 billion in the pockets of the Trump-Kushner crime family, and who Donald praises at every turn, 12 years ago, or maybe it's 13 years ago now, he had 39 imams. That's the functional equivalent of a pastor or a rabbi in Islam. He had 39 imams publicly beheaded for the crime of praying for a better government. The people we call allies are just as vicious as the Iranians. And Donald Trump has now ensured through his conduct that the enmity between the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims in the Middle East, there's one major country run by Shias, and that's Iran, and the Sunnis, that has gone on for 1,401 years, will continue, and it will be worse. Because he has no idea. And you remember he once said, well, what about your legacy, Mr. President? He says, what do I care? I'll be dead.
Well, he doesn't even know Shia. I don't think he knows he's even attacked a Shia country. I don't think he knows the Shia minority. I don't think he knows where the Kurds are. I don't think he has any understanding of the sort of the, nor does Witkoff, by the way. I mean, the idea that you send Witkoff over there to negotiate this, or he was talking about Steve called me, that's Steve Witkoff. That's his golfing buddy who he's made in charge of negotiations along with Jared. Play for me.
Witkoff does know how to negotiate a big real estate deal. I'll give him that. These are not real estate deals we're talking about. He is completely out of his league, and so is Jared.
Well, by the way, just for the Iranian side, because you referenced it, here's what Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Khalifaf, says: "We are definitely not looking for a ceasefire. We believe that the aggressor should be punched in the mouth so that he learns a lesson, so that he will never think of attacking our beloved Iran again." Another top Iranian official said this, appearing to threaten Donald Trump himself: "Iran doesn't fear your empty threats. Even those bigger than you couldn't eliminate Iran. Be careful not to get eliminated yourself." And of course, we had mentioned this, David, that I thought one of the things that animated Trump, I mean, I understand he might have been hot to do this anyway, but I think that the idea was, hey, that guy in power in Iran, he's sending different cells over to this country. They're planning your assassination. They've expressed it, and they're going to do it. So you need to get him before he gets you. And he said as much. And I think that we talked about it last time a bit, David. I think that might have been one of the things that sold it.
I agree with you. I think if you're trying to manipulate Donald, who's easy to manipulate, that telling him that there are Iranian cells in the country who want to kill you is going to be an effective mechanism to do that. And yet, when the Iranians very clearly declared they were going to kill, if they could, the former head of our military, General Mark Milley, What did Donald do? He took away the security detail for the retired general. So this is all about Donald. It is not about America first. It is not about the welfare of our country. It is not about patriotism. Donald doesn't have a patriotic bone in his body. If he did, when the Russians offered in writing to interfere in our campaign in 2015, Donald Trump or one of his minions or one of his family members would have picked up the phone and called the FBI's counterintelligence division. They didn't do that. So there's no changing who Donald is. He's what we get. What there's a need for is things like, as someone just said in the comment, I think that's a good idea. Trump loves to put his name on everything. Let's call this the Trump war. Let's see to it that we shame as much as we can, and if they have any shame, the Republicans in Congress who will not stand up to him and will not simply do their constitutional duty. Here's how bad it is. We're paying 6 times the assessed value of one of these warehouses to hold people in detention centers, which makes no sense if you're just deporting people out of the country. Clearly, they're getting ready to round up huge numbers of Americans and put them into concentration camps. That's clearly what they're doing. And lo and behold, who got paid 6 times that value, which is probably 8 or 10 times the value of a building that's been on the market for more than a year unsold? A Russian. Oh my goodness, it's all a hoax, Russia. The thing that got Kristi Noem fired, claiming Donald Trump had approved her ad campaign where she's all dolled up to look very beautiful riding on horseback. $220 million no-bid contract that one step back from the lead contractor is somebody politically connected to her. The movie Barbie only cost $145 million. Oppenheimer only cost $100 million. Clearly, there's massive corruption and theft going on in that contract. Where are the fiscally conservative Republicans saying that's an abuse of taxpayer money and we want these people prosecuted and sent to prison?
Yeah, it's so well stated. Yeah, that media thing was a straight up corrupt money grab. And I want to play for David because he referenced Congress, cut 14. Democrats are making noise. We'll see if that noise cuts through. Here they are on a panel. Cut 14, please, Tony. This is Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin.
Senator Baldwin, just on what you heard from the president today, is it clear to you how much longer this war could go on for?
No, and this president has been anything but clear from the very outset. Weeks before the war started, he said he might intervene militarily to support the protesters in Iran. Thereafter, he talked about their nuclear program. Thereafter, he talked about their ballistic missile program. Thereafter, he talked about regime change. Now he's talking about protecting the Straits of Hormuz. And we keep hearing reason and shifting rationale. Look, the reason we need hearings is to allow the American public to have a say in this war. This president went to war, a war of choice. We were not under attack. We were not under imminent threat of attack. And the American people, through their elected members of Congress, have not had a voice in this yet. And that's why we're demanding hearings.
First of all, mad respect for working in the word hereafter that many times. But also, she's right. They just go around Congress now. And there's been a history, David, of Congress not really having control of the American military the way the president does these days.
The piece that I did that's a DC Report and on my social media about why everybody should be reading the New York Times and get off this cynical notion there's nothing there. Incredible front page on Sunday of really powerful, important pieces. And one, the lead story at the top by the great reporter Charlie Savage, is about how the Constitution's order has been eroded steadily since the Cold War. And Trump has now basically obliterated it. So to those people who say, and I'm a Republican, I believe in the Constitution. Well, the Constitution says that Congress can declare war, nobody else, just Congress. Only Congress can impose taxes, and tariffs are a form of tax. And the material from the period of the Constitutional Convention makes clear that everybody understood that tariffs were taxes. It wasn't possible to not know that even if you were illiterate back then. So where are you on defending our Constitution? You were not voted into office to bend the knee to Donald Trump or any president. And by the way, where is the legislation? Nothing is being passed or done. I mean, this is Harry Truman complained in 1948 about the do-nothing Congress. This is the most do-nothing Congress by far. They can barely get a bill passed renaming a post office.
It's wild, too, David, that there is an effort now to hold up legislation on the part of Trump until his Save America Act comes through, which involves voter ID and a bunch of other voting-related overlay, bureaucracy, essentially. So that is happening. That threat is happening. It's sort of being lost in the Iran stuff, understandably. And also, there's a partial closure of government right now. You've got, there are TSA lines that are hours long at airports all across America.
Yeah, and there's no discussion going on in order to fix that. Trump wants to blame the Democrats for this. I don't think that's going to work. Presidents historically get the blame, even if they are not to blame. In this case, clearly Trump is. We have this massive federal government that is not functioning because he's appointed people who are not competent, in some cases U.S. attorneys who are not lawfully appointed. And this is all just a reflection of what happens when you get an absolute amateur, a child in there. I mean, we've had presidents who came in with relatively little authority and power, but after all, Ronald Reagan was governor of California for 8 years. He had some experience dealing with those things. Bill Clinton had been a governor. George W. Bush had been a governor, minimally connected with things, but he'd been a governor. He's a great example of Nepo baby failing upward. Barack Obama, he was senator long enough to have a cup of coffee on Capitol Hill, and then we put him in the White House. But at least he had a very serious education and a very elegant mind. That's why, as a first-year law student, he got his name on a law review essay by his professor, which just never happens. As a law professor, let me tell you, that doesn't happen unless you are the most extraordinary mind and have great insights. And Joe Biden, a guy who'd effectively been a legislative diplomat, the man who went to see, I forget which one of the leaders, I think it was Milosevic, of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and basically said, knock off the ethnic cleansing and the mass murders where they would take a whole village and kill all the men and boys, or you're going to die in prison in The Hague. Face to face, he had the courage to go do that. They could have killed him. And he went and face to face and told them to knock it off. But Donald Trump, you have somebody who never did a single day of public service in his life. Everything is about him. He doesn't know anything. And look at the mess we've gotten into. And he may be able now to shut down this military operation, Trump's Middle East war. But the damage from that is going to continue. The increased enmity, the need to buy more weapons. And by the way, here's the story that has really gotten away from everybody. There is credible reporting that the Russians are helping the Iranians target missiles against American military bases. And Donald I don't know anything about that. Well, it's your job to know something about that. And if the Russians are doing that, that's an act of war. Now, I'm not calling for a war. I'm not calling for pulling out nuclear weapons, which are defensive weapons. Even if Tehran had a nuclear weapon, they're not going to hit Tel Aviv. They'll say lots of rhetoric about it, because what would happen if the Iranians actually dropped a nuke on Israel? Iran would be blown off the face of the earth. There'd be instant, massive retaliation. The reason countries have nuclear weapons is entirely defensive. And the proof of that, if you doubt it, is Ukraine. If they hadn't given up their nuclear weapons in return for the Russian promise to never invade, we wouldn't have that war going on.
Bravo. And just because you mentioned the Russians, and then I'll let up, but because I'm sensitive to the time I'm keeping you. But because you mentioned the Russians, it's been widely reported that Vladimir Putin called Donald Trump and advised him on how to end this war. The notion that these two are talking, of course, this the Strait of Hormuz thing is really good, and just the price of oil going up and the Russian oil stores and the Russian oil production becomes all the more valuable. But just speak to that, the idea somehow that Putin could advise Trump as to how to end this conflict.
Well, Donald on another scale is like Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, who said Donald was a kook and a racist and totally unfit to be president. Now everything Donald does is terrific, and we shouldn't really be questioning what he does. And Donald in the same way, because his father was just this unmitigated monster. Mark, if you had had him for his father, you wouldn't be who you are. You wouldn't have survived that. You would have either ended up a drunk and dying at the age you're at now, as Donald's older brother did, or you'd end up a monster like Donald, or you'd end up a scared little person who does whatever your bullying older brother does with Robert Trump.
Right.
Putin to Donald is like a father figure. I mean, what president of the United States goes around saying, I don't trust the American intelligence services, but I trust Vladimir Putin and I take him at his word? Who says, I admire the dictator, the hereditary dictator in North Korea, where they punish whole families for multiple generations because one member of the family opposed the family regime. And that's someone who has no idea what he's doing and who's only about himself. And what I'm most troubled by is that there's some fissures going on in the MAGA movement. The war is one. There's some other issues that are creating some fissures, the biggest other one being the Epstein files. But he still has very solid support from 25% or so of the public. The poll I looked at earlier today showed a 32% approval rating, which, low as that is, really 32%, that 1 in 3 Americans. And this is a poll that, does 1,504 people, which mathematically is the magic number and has a good reputation. We have failed badly, not just at teaching American history and the values of our Constitution and simple things like math, which is why fast food joints, have cash registers that has a picture of the hamburger or the milkshake, and then it tells you in dollars and cents how much change to give out. We're failing in a sense of moral obligation to your fellow man. We're failing in a sense of not understanding that it is through cooperation that human beings have made the advances that they have. And we're failing in the sense of not having an ethos. I mean, if our country is an idea, that's been a crucial thought process by the intellectual class from the very beginning of the United States, that our country is an idea. We need to make sure that people understand those ideas. And you don't have to be a college professor to understand those ideas. You can be a janitor and understand those important basic ideas, which are about, as the preamble to our Constitution lays out, ennobling the human spirit to see what human beings who are free and live in an environment of ordered liberty can accomplish. Trump's undoing all of that as fast as he can because he wants absolute power. And we've already seen that it has been absolutely corrupting, as Lord Acton would say.
Yeah, that was well done with the Lord Acton, a manner of the Lord Acton reference. David, so grateful for your time and your takes. It's, I could talk to you for hours because the world demands it. And I think you point to what you last said points to something that is so key, which is that, the American ideals, the thing that sort of is the coherence for all of us. We know of the values, the liberty, the freedom, the civil rights that we're evolving so beautifully. Troubled as they are, that's the America that we really want to hold on to and worth fighting for. And sadly, it's just being eroded at an incredible rate.
Seriously, read this book, Born Sick in America. It's not very long, as you can see, and it will teach you so much about what's really at issue with our non-healthcare system, our non-system sick care system that is ridiculously expensive and is only one part of why other countries, people's lives are going longer, ours aren't. They don't have nearly as many maternal deaths, infant deaths, lots of other things. They don't have the levels of disability that we have, because there's a whole system you have to look at, not just the medical system.
I will read that book, says Zero Sum. We'll link to that book under this video, Born Sick in the USA. Thank you, Professor. We'll talk next week. David K. Johnston.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.